Yeah, but what's that? Someone's going to go.
Well, that's Ken and Block.
Yeah, right.
Let me do one thing here. Okay.
The lunch is up there. Oh, thank you.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have all of you to our first lunch and learn. I'm sorry. Yeah. To our first lunch and learn, and hopefully the first of many. So spread the word. Keep your eye on the email. So today's topic is renewing the soul, finding inner peace and purpose during the high holidays. And I'm going to share some ideas. Then Dina will share some ideas, and then we'll share some more ideas. And
you guys can share ideas.
You can share ideas and can ask questions, etc., etc. So this doesn't have to be a lecture. It could be more of a discussion. And but let's get started. So as we approach the season, my experience is that Jews get anxious a little bit. We're anxious about showing up on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and imagining what might be going on in the heavens, evaluating our own insecurities, evaluating whether we did enough this past year, judging ourselves even before we let God judge us. So it's a very nerve-wracking time, but it's also a time in the season of life where we pause to reflect on where things are in our personal lives. It's a time where we evaluate perhaps regrets that we have, things that we didn't do this year that we had hoped. And it's not even issues of sin. Just I wish I would have pursued that hobby a little bit more. I wish I was more present with my spouse or children. Frustrations with health issues, frustrations with relationships, frustrations with finance. So it's really a beautiful, as complex as that is, it's actually a beautiful part of our tradition that we have this season where we are kind of compelled to pause and take the time to think about what life is really all about and what's really important. In this year, we have to reflect on a zoomed out camera, looking at what's gone on in the world this past year. It's been a very difficult year, very painful year. But also a lot of beautiful things in all of that darkness and all of that pain is the identity of the Jew that's been very pronounced in so many different aspects of life. There's a woman who very, very not involved Jewishly, and early on after October 7th was texting me her frustrations with the anti-Semitism and ignorance she was encountering. And not to focus on this right now, but I never seen a text from her so excited about what just went on with the pagers exploding and stuff like that. And what she wrote to me is, I've never felt more pride as a Jew, And again, I personally, I don't want to find our pride I don't want to find our Jewish pride in the Israeli Shin Bet's effect on terrorists. That's not where I want to find my Jewish pride, but it is indicative of the fact that Jews are looking to find Jewish pride. They want to wrap their heads around feeling proud to be Jewish.
Hard not to be proud of what they did.
Say that again?
Very hard not to be. proud
Sure,
of
sure. It's a,
Leadership Cup.
yeah, and we find pride in all kinds of things, and there's no question about it. But it's not what makes us. It's not the identity of the Jew. That's the chachma. That's the ingenuity of the Jew. But it's not. That's not what it. That's a byproduct. I just read a headline this morning, and I just had to laugh. It's right. Everybody's trying to figure out how we all suspect that Israel was involved in this, and how did they sabotage all of these beepers? You can imagine the conversation taking place around the table of all of these intelligence officers saying, "How do we know that this is a great idea, but how do we sabotage these beepers?" So one guy says, "Well, let's not sabotage them. Let's make them," and that's what they did. Israel manufactured these beepers. And it's a New York Times headline today. They actually made them. Why do you have to sabotage them when you can make them? You just got to get them into the right hands. But they actually manufactured them. Exactly where and how, I don't know. They've created all these shell companies, but that's basically what happened. Anyway, so there's a lot. There's so much going on. And if a computer is processing data, at whatever they call them, MBSs per second, however they work. Our brains and our hearts and the whole complexity of each of us as a unique individual is heavy at work, processing as we enter into this new season, this new year, processing so many different complex thoughts and feelings, each of us in our own experience, us collectively, and so on. So how do we find inner peace in this season? Because that's, I think, at the end of the day, the agitation that we feel of this thought process and these feelings is we just want things to be, anchored and calm and peaceful. We don't want our heartbeat to be moving too fast. We just want nice, peaceful, enter into the season to be able to navigate it with joy and equilibrium. One other kind of overall question is that it is a season of growth, and there's always a self-judgment that each of us has around our own self-growth, and we question how it is and why it is that another year went by and all of those good intentions that we may have had back last year this time didn't necessarily materialize as we would have hoped for. So that's kind of the setting for today's discussion. You want to share?
No, I'm curious what people are on people's minds when they come into Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, okay. So what's on people's minds?
In your mind.
Maybe repercussions for some of the clever activities of the Shin Bet. Those people in Lebanon probably going to want to strike back in some way against Israel. I also wonder what Iran has against Israel. They seem to be involved in so many negative activities toward Israel. That worries me. They're a big country. They have nuclear abilities. It's kind of scary. And they have to have an external enemy so that the deficiencies of their society are forgotten. If you hate the Jews and you fight the Jews.
Oh, that's the way it's always been. We've always been.
That's actually a great thing to speak about if we're speaking about Rosh Hashanah, is this kind of distractibility, where we put something somewhere else, and that it does segue nicely into this month we're in, which is the month of Elul. And Elul is an acronym for a few things, but one of the acronyms of Elul, Rabbi will have to remind me, is for
Ina liyada v'samti lach.
right, Ina liyada v'samti lach, which is the Hashem giving us this Ir Miklat, this place of refuge. And so what is Elul and a city of refuge? What do they have in common? Why is the recognition or the this is from the pasuk of the city of refuge, when Hashem tells us, I gave you a city of refuge. Do you all know what the city of refuge is? If somebody commits a murder by accident, there are six cities of refuge throughout the Jewish land that they can run to. And there they can take refuge. They're not allowed to be, there's no revenge allowed to take place. And whatever happens after that is delineated. But what is this concept of, we learn about city of refuge through the month of Elul. The month of Elul is also, as we know, the month where Hasidic Kabbalah teaches us that God is in the field. So when you close your eyes and you think of a field, right, it's like very expansive and large and wide. The rabbi and I, we were just in Iceland, and they say if you get lost in a forest in Iceland, just stand up. You know, it's fields and fields of lava, and there's mountains, but it's this expansiveness. It's so big and wide and hard to comprehend. So we have this city of refuge, we have that God is in the field. And what does all this have to do with this month? So it's in this month that we are given the space to be, to sit, to be in the space. Like literally think of a field as or the city of refuge as a place just to be. The imagery of the field again is like wide and spaciousness, and that's what we need before we enter the land of Israel, because we're so busy evaluating ourselves and distracting ourselves and thinking about the worry and the fear, and God says, no, here's a month where it's you're in a city of refuge. You just get to be in the place. And so much of change happens if you allow yourself space. So also the rabbi said in the beginning, like we kind of get to zoom out, and that's the other thing, like being in Iceland, like you just saw like this whole expanse, and you were able to really zoom out from the bigger picture. When you need awareness even to have space, right? Like you need to know that you need the space in order to take the space, right? If you're constantly going. So that's the other point of if we think about where do we create space, everything that happens in the outside world needs to happen in our inside world. That's a tenet of Jewish living. So if we're, where's the space inside of us? Where's the Ir Miklat? Where can we go to? Where's our own refuge? And that's, if you think about it, we're like doing all year. We're evaluating, we're distracting, we're accomplishing. And then Elul comes and we get to go. Get to create space. If you've ever taken yoga, it's like the inhale, right? Like you do the hard thing, the hardest thing with the exhale, right? Like you're not working so hard. You're like giving it space, right? You do the harder thing with the exhale because then you don't have to work it again. You like prepare yourself with the inhale, and with the exhale, you get to do the thing, because that's where you create like an ability to not be holding it all together. So I guess the few things are having the awareness. It all starts with awareness. So coming to this class is awareness, like, like, okay, Rosh Hashanah is coming. I need to know something. I need to put something inside of me. I need to know something. And then in this class, we're telling you, just create that space. Just allow yourself a pause. Allow yourself to exhale. And often when we're choosing between A and B, if we're caught up in all the months of the year and the holding our breath and the accomplishing and the distracting and the doing and the going, our brain is so narrow because we only see A or B. But then when we exhale and we go to the Ir Miklat, that's the whole point, is wait, there's another option. There is another option here. There's something else. So we create this expansiveness, again, the field, by taking the space. And that's really what Elul is about, is giving ourselves space. Imagine if we went from like the whole summer and getting our kids back into school, and everything is like, oh, after the summer, even if your kids are not in school, even if you don't have children, a lot of people put things off after the summer, right? In September, how many, in September, and then there's in January or in after the first of the year, right? Like there's always this push off to when. So imagine if we went from in September, which is our regular lives, and then suddenly Rosh Hashanah is here, like that. We would just come to Rosh Hashanah like nervous wrecks. So we're allowed now to just take that time for ourselves to recalibrate and really think about who we want, and maybe think about nothing, just be, just like, who am I? I'm a person. I'm in this world. What is my purpose here? Why am I? What am I doing here? That's naturally going to creep up for us if we give ourselves a space. And just one other thing, just kind of a little bit of a paradox to what I'm saying, a little contradictory, but that's how you know it's true, because the greatest truths are paradoxes. Like you have to be able to hold both tensions. And that's how Judaism is always keeping us on our toes. So Elul is the month in the secular calendar, in the regular year. What does everyone say? They make these major commitments in January, and then it like goes down, down, down. And then by February, everyone is already like, okay, in January, I'll do it. Like no one even tries anymore, right? Like you're at the end of doing nothing. January, you peak, and then you slow down, then you plateau, and then you start again. So there's a pasuk about Elul that says, this is the month, right? What's the pasuk? You're my pasuk giver.
Which pasuk?
Zeh Hashana, and then it says Shana. It says in the tefillah of Rosh Hashanah, right? What's the pasuk? Do you remember?
I'm not sure.
So the pasuk talks about the year in two ways. It says, this is the year, and then it says year. So what is this is the year?
Are you talking about Mereshis Hashana ad Achris Shana?
Right. So it says Mereshis Hashana, from the beginning of the year, ad Achris Shana. And it should say, once again, the year, if it's using the proper noun for year. We don't say at the beginning of year, we say at the beginning of the year. And it says that from the beginning of the year until the end of year. So because what always happens at the end? At the beginning of the year, we're like, this is the year. This is the year I'm going to stop this. And this is the year I'm going to start this and this and this. So what Elul is for us is gives us the encouragement to pause and do something that allows you to finish off the year, not with this like, oh, I'm such a loser. I didn't accomplish this. Something tiny, you're still given this space of time to get it done. Nothing huge, but like, what is something that you committed to at the beginning of the year, which was, this is the year?
I did something yesterday. I got a lot of points.
Yeah? So
Yeah.
you took advantage of Elul.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well, our patio, our driveway to our patio has a one step, but it's about 12 inches. And I have my storage building, and we walk our cats, and I put a handle on the storage building so Charna can get up without, it's a 12-inch step.
Mhm.
Big step. Yeah.
So this handle.
So you did something
Very
nice for your
gentlemanly
wife,
of you.
Yeah, it
and you
big.
accomplished it in this month.
It was a big hug and kisses.
Nice.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So that's what the other side of this is, that when you're given this space, this time before Rosh Hashanah, you're given a grace period of saying, if you end this year in a slump, okay, you'll make new commitments because that's what everyone does. But if you end the year on a high, think of how much higher you'll start the next year, and then you could end the next year on high. And if life is a spiral, then we're always traveling further up in our own, psyche, our own emotions, growing. This is a great way to, grab the handle and step up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So what prevents us from seeing the opportunity at the end of the year as something that we can actually accomplish right now. In other words, as opposed to seeing the need to make big change, to value the small change. So what is it that prevents us? It's our own self-judgment. Oh, I'm sorry, you'd ask
No,
the
it's-
question?
No, I
Oh,
felt like
you want me
should
to-
ask the question.
Okay,
Let
so what
everyone-
prevents us from doing that?
The habit. You know, so we value, maybe overvalue, doing the big thing, getting the big job accomplished.
Hmm.
But why do we do that? Why do we only value the big job? Why do we put such emphasis on it?
I'm gonna quote now, a relatively famous psychologist named Albert Ellis. Remember quoting, who said, "We are all," quote, "we are all fucked up, fallible human beings who behave effectively as well as ineffectively." End quote. And so it just, I guess I'm trying to say it's part of the human condition. And of course, I think it's also based on our histories and maybe comparing ourselves to other people. And boy, you really got that job done. You know, like I bought a shed, tool shed, you know, put it in the backyard. I got one shovel in it. And I got a pile of tools. Lawn equipment, oil, you know, whatever you can think of in the basement. And my goal is to, for this year, is to get it organized. But I, being a fallible human being, yes, I could pick up one piece, I'm not really organized. I pick up one piece of paper, spin around 3 times, and put it back down in the same place. Well, it's really difficult for me to get organized. I've been thinking it out for years. But, and again, it's maybe part of our histories, so to speak.
So, yeah, so I want to say 2 things. So first of all, I think the big things versus the small things is when we're living outside of ourselves, like then we're looking around and we're saying like, I want to accomplish as opposed to someone else. Like I want to be someone for somebody else. But when we live inside of ourselves, then we say like, what do I really want? And it usually has nothing to do with the big things. And it usually doesn't have a lot to do with what other people are accomplishing. And not to, compare and contrast, because we just said we don't do that, but like he did something so tiny, which was so intentional and intrinsic to like helping just a tiny little thing. And that it's like, and look what he got from that. And you are sitting with this big, huge job and probably judging yourself about it. And if you sometimes, and if you sat with it and, really said, I'm a little bit ADHD and I'm also pretty busy in my life and, it's heavy and it's hard and maybe I bit off, you have compassion over your own inability to get it done. You probably would put one thing in the shed and then you'd be able to put another thing and you just do it slowly but surely.
Well, I think I'm
One
working,
job.
Yeah.
I think I'm working on world-class Olympic training for procrastination. I'm getting really good at it.
Or maybe you're just slowing down because, it's
No,
the time of
I've
your
been like
life.
this for a very long time. When I was I had a whole bunch of school, and if I had a research project and had to write up the final results and they were due at a certain time, even though I started it on time, I would never finish it until the day it was due. I have no idea, except I think I'm a world-class procrastinator.
You work better under pressure.
I beg your pardon?
You work better under pressure.
Well, that's
Deadline.
probably
You
true.
need the lessons.
I'm a trained
yourself
intelligence
moving.
officer, so yes, I do work well under pressure.
But also if you took the time, like the field, the owl, and just sat with it, like it would tell you something. Like usually when we're not doing something and we sit with what we're not doing, it tells us, like, it tells us why we're not doing it. There's another, like the option you've probably been saying for years is I'm a procrastinator, I'm fallible. Those are all very general, outside of ourselves terms that define why we're not doing something, but they have nothing to do with what we are actually experiencing inside of ourselves. It's just a symptom of what is actually going on,
Well,
right?
I use a rule every year to finish something.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly Dina's point, is to do something, right? Instead of becoming paralyzed by the notion that I'm not doing the big thing. And I have a friend who always says, like, anybody who makes big announcements usually doesn't get much done, right? So just don't make big announcements, just do the small thing. The small thing actually gets done. But I think a little bit to Dina's point, there's a lot of self-talk that we have, and that self-talk comes from this notion of human fallibility. It comes from our narrative, our story. It comes from how we evaluate ourselves against others. There's a notion, there's a concept today called presentism, where we judge the past based on our present experience. And the reality is that the world is an evolving place, and spiritually, that's even more so. Spiritually, the fact that the world is where it is right now, with all of its complexities, all of human psychology, this is is part of the master plan. So we can't look back at history and say, they were so sheltered and they were so dark and they were so bad because of that, because the world wasn't evolved as it is today in many ways back then. But we could learn from today to help shift the way we look at today and the experiences that we deal with today. So just because in the past the season was looked at through a certain lens, and just because we may have these fallibilities and insecurities and self-judgments, it doesn't mean we need to stay there, right? What Dina's saying is in terms of like just pausing and being with the procrastination, being with the uncomfortable feeling, and trying to listen to what's the messaging that's being conveyed there. These are tools that we're being taught now that we can think about. So I want to kind of just do one overall shift in thinking about the season, that I think might be helpful towards this objective of experiencing the high holidays in a more equilibrium kind of fashion. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the speaker, the interviewee, shared something interesting. He said that God likes messy. And we spend so much time running away from messy, right? This self-judgment is this notion of getting away from messy. I got to be someone else. In order for me to show up for God, right? That judgment, that self-judgment, I've got to stop being this way. I've got to start being that way. And the fact is that if God didn't like messy, we know this concept, you've heard it if you've attended any class here, that God wanted to have a dwelling place on this earth below, in the physical reality. But if that's all God wanted, he would have created human beings without any kind of struggle. And we would be able to do all the mitzvahs. We'd eat food, we'd make a blessing on the food, we do all the mitzvahs, and it would be wonderful. God would have a dwelling place in a physical world. But that's not what God did. God created a physical world, and he created messy. If there's a verse in the Torah that says, Zeh Sefer told us Adam, this is the story of man, the story of man's journey, right? Each of our stories, we can write the story in a book, but if we really wrote the story, all of the process, it would go on forever. So complicated, so messy. each of our stories. There's so many layers to it. But that's what God wants. God wants messy. In relationships are messy. All relationships are messy. Some are messier than others, but all relationships are messy. But specifically, I use the term a love relationship, right? As opposed to a business relationship, as opposed to other kinds of partnerships that might exist out there. A love relationship between spouses, between parent and child, child and parent, child and siblings. What does each party ultimately want in any of those love relationships? Anybody? As they are. To be loved without any of the accepted, without any of the judgments, without any preconditions, without just the reality is that the part of us that's messy and the part of the other person's that's messy prevents that from being a natural go-to. And therefore we have to work through that. But what we want at the end of the day is take all the messy out, keep all your messy to yourself, ignore all of my messy, and let's just accept me at this core level. That's what the season is about. The season is about us recognizing that God loves us and accepts us at our core. But the upside that we have in our relationship with God is that God not only in the human relationship, in order to get there, you have to oftentimes put aside the messy, or you got to work through the messy. With God, God accepts you for who you are at your core with messy, and accepts you completely and totally. I remember once before a high holiday, maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was a visiting rabbi who came in and he was shared this really, really impacted me and my high holiday thinking. He shared this notion that we are so afraid, we have to show up for the high holidays. Like God is waiting there for us and he's expecting us there, and all of this self-talk. And he says, we got the picture wrong. God comes to the high holiday season. He says, please, please come. He's turning to us and he's saying, please show up. I love you. I want you. And if we think about it in those terms, then the whole season changes. Because we're not showing up with self-judgment. We're showing up knowing that we're accepted and loved in the totality of who we are. So when Rosh Hashanah comes along and we accept God as king, imagine a benevolent king who loves his subjects, and you show up there. It's great. It's wonderful. Yes, it's an awesome day of profound royalty, but we're showing up with this ready to embrace this benevolent, wonderful, compassionate king. And yes, the reality is in relationships, if you've ever had a conflict in a relationship, when you make up with your loved one, or your loved one makes up with you, there's a certain freedom that comes after that healing, right? That's what Yom Kippur is about. God is loving us and accepting us and forgiving us for our shortcomings in a way no human being ever would. The totality of who we are. And then Sukkot, we sit in the sukkah together with God and we celebrate together, right? Those late night parties where you're hanging out with your friends and it's just everything is like you're zen. You had a couple of l'chaims and everybody's enjoying each other's company. Like here, you're hanging out with God in the sukkah. God's embracing you with the walls of the sukkah. It's fantastic. And then you pick up your lover's arms and you begin to dance, right? And the deep connection, that's Simchas Torah. So if we start with recognizing how expansive God's love is for us, and that God loves messy, and he takes all of that in, we can let all of the stress of the season go.
Week's Parsha is all about joy.
Yes.
And the Sukkot Parsha is always read before Hashanah, but there's also the curses, aren't there?
So you said it's a paradox.
Well, that's really that you we're meant to look at the curses as an access to our deepest joy. All the challenges that we go through in life, and they're really quite painful, are there for us to ultimately access our most deep parts of ourselves. You know, when you're handed, when you enter a house, if somebody handed you a house and said, here's your home, here's your car, here's the furniture, here's the linen, and everything's perfect and everything's gorgeous, you're going to enjoy that for as long as you enjoy it, as opposed to like, if you build the house, you pay for it, you bought every accessory and every detail, and you put your hard work into it, you are going to appreciate it that much more. You know, if somebody handed you a practice and said, these are your clients and go, you know, make your money, as opposed to like, no, I earned each client, I created a relationship with each client, I know who they are, like that, we all know which one we appreciate more. I think that's why Rooms to Go was just never a good idea.
Yeah, it's messy, but messy is beautiful.
It's hard.
There's
Anyone have any thing that's coming up for them around this, around like a mind shift or space, or looking at themselves in another way around this? Anyone want to share anything?
We have, our garage has soil on one side of it. And when there's a heavy rain, the water gets down to the bottom of the garage wall and seeps into the floor of the garage. So about 3 months ago, I bought some concrete seal. It's the kind you put in the gun, you know, I forget what they're called, but it just has a little trigger on it.
It's sprayer,
What?
the sprayer.
Yeah, whatever. And so, I put the concrete seal containers first in my workroom, then I moved them out to the garage. And they were there all this time, and suddenly last week,
in the midst of a drought.
I decided to seal this. It's a pretty long run from the door of the garage to the back of the garage. So I started sealing it, and I wasn't used to doing that kind of working in that position. I got pretty sore. I had to work on it more than a couple of days, but I eventually completed the seal from one end. It's just this one wall, and I'm waiting for a heavy rain to see.
Yeah, we all are.
Enjoy the fruits of your labor. Not before tomorrow night.
No,
Shabbos
it's not gonna rain.
afternoon it could rain, not tomorrow night.
It's not gonna rain.
Right, so
Because it's just gonna come back. It's gonna test your seal. You really need a drain
a drain.
and then put rocks on top.
We did that in Kansas. We lived in a flood zone
Mhm.
and a 300-year flood zone. And we did all that work on the yard, and it actually improved the value of our property by about $5,000. So it was worth the effort.
Well, that involved digging.
And putting in rocks and
Yeah. We bought this tubing. It's sort of black tubing, and buried it. So that, and it ran down behind the house
To
into
the
the stream.
anyway, we do occasionally, both of us finish something this month. It is a big stuff.
Yeah.
I think some of the really great gifts we have. It's hard work.
Yeah.
The trouble is, whenever I finish something, somebody else who lives in my house comes up with another thing.
I wonder what her name